Because the BOE is limited by the Freedom of Information Act to discussing only matters on the agenda, the BOE is not permitted to engage in a discussion of the comments presented. Okay, do you want to be taken? Thank you. Okay, do we have anybody who would like to make public comment? Anyone online like to make public comment? Okay. All right, so the next portion of the agenda is the addition or deletion of any agenda items. Oh, okay. That will bring us to the chair report. I just had a couple of things. Last week, I sat in on a CABE chair check-in, and on the agenda was the cell phone policy discussion. There were actually other things on the agenda that we didn't get to because the discussion was so engaged. But the bottom line of it, different schools are doing different things. The governor's office is going to be putting out some sort of guidance later this week that will probably give us a lot more direction and information for us to consider as we move forward. But it was kind of an interesting discussion I would say there was probably 10 different towns represented and what they're doing, what their challenges are. It was an interesting discussion. The other thing I wanted to mention was the convocation is Monday.
No, yes, convocation is Monday the 26th. Hopefully people got an invitation. Did Jessica send an email out?
I don't think
so. My apologies. I had asked her to do that last week. We would welcome any board members who are able to join us at convocation. It starts at 8:30 in the auditorium. I'll have Jessica send that email message out tomorrow so that you can RSVP if your schedule permits. It'd be great. It's 8:30
a.m.
a.m. Yes, sir. I think it'd be a quiet auditorium if it was 8:30 p.m. For sure. But no, it's the opening day, kind of a fun way to kick off and celebrate the new school year. Would love to have board members come if your schedule permits. So yes, I apologize. I'd asked Jessica to send that out last week, but hopefully that works for your schedule, and she'll send that out tomorrow, and you can RSVP if you're able to make it.
I was able to go last year, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't really know what to expect, but it was a great morning, even if you can't stay for the whole thing, because I think it's a good chunk of time for the entire
hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe hour and a half, maybe at the most.
But even if you could stop by in the morning and just say, hello, I thought it was really worthwhile. Unfortunately, I will be out of state for work next week and won't be able to attend, but do want to wish all the teachers and administrators good luck on a new school year. Can't believe that we're looking at the last week and a half of summer, but best wishes to you guys, all of you. And that's it for me.
Great.
But Heather, just to follow up on your call regarding CABE and the cell phone policy, they're having a webinar on Thursday on exactly this at noon on Thursday.
Thank you. I actually have it written down and didn't say it.
So you can sign up for that.
Check your email if you want to sit in and hear what it's going to be at 12. Dial in. It was super easy to do, and they'll kind of do a report out of whatever the governor's office is
because they're presenting on Wednesday, the 21st, right? The sample guidelines are supposed to be provided.
Yes. So then this will just be
in the wake of that.
A discussion, for any of the board members, if you want to listen in. I thought it was worth it last week.
So yeah, no, I'll start off just I want to recognize the hard work of our employees that are here during the summer months, our custodial and maintainers. They do a phenomenal job of preparing the buildings for the start of another school year. We are geared up and ready to have everybody come back on Monday. Very excited about it. And the custodial staff does so much, and maintaining staff does so much, as well as our clerical support staff, our administration, department coordinators, the teachers that worked on curriculum projects over the summer, our summer school teachers, our ESY teachers. I've had a few people who, even though I've been a school administrator for 25 years, still look at me and are like, well, you get summers off, right? I'm like, no, we do not get summers off. Summers are a very busy time in any school or district, and just appreciate the critical and time-consuming work that people do here during the summer months. I do want to update the board on some news. So you may remember that I had shared some concern about our athletic trainer and supplier being able to staff the vacancy that had been created. Those concerns, unfortunately, were accurate, and they were not able to fill the athletic training position for us. They actually had a clause in their contract that enabled them to give us a proper notification and essentially break that 5-year contract that they had with us. And they did that. They had to, and they were remorseful. They were apologetic about having to do it, but they just simply couldn't fill the position. It is unfortunately a significant shortage area. Dan has been working tirelessly, Dan Trudeau, our athletic director, to essentially work with local organizations that we can contract with, or individuals that we can contract with, to kind of piecemeal together a schedule so that we do have athletic training coverage. He is pretty well covered for the majority of the fall season, but still working on some events. The coverage that we have is for games. That's what we're trying at, games and athletic contests. The good news is those games and athletic contests are happening almost every day of the week once the season kicks in. So we're really going to have a pretty steady presence of an athletic trainer. This could be something that we try to flush out in the budget process. It could be a position that we try to create for the district and hire somebody. I will tell you that even if we do decide to create a position and try to hire somebody, it still, I believe, will be a challenge. I believe that I'd mentioned to the board back in June that this was a distinct possibility. And I had said, I think it's worthwhile for even us to explore the idea of hiring somebody. And Dan has talked to individuals and organizations saying, hey, we might be interested in hiring somebody, creating a position. And if you know of anybody that's interested, have them let us know. And we have not heard from anybody yet. So again, it's problematic. I will tell you that I received a communication from a colleague of mine in a neighboring district and said, what do you guys have for athletic training services? And I said, well, interesting, we don't have anything right now. He said, ours just left us as well. So this is a problem that's really prevalent across the state. So, but I'm confident that we'll be able to figure out a way to address it. So just to let people know, we, as Heather mentioned, we do have convocation and PD days starting on next Monday, the 26th. We also will be welcoming 10 new certified staff members. We have new teacher orientation on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. We're excited to have filled our vacancies with high quality talent from some coming straight from school, some coming from other local school districts, and some coming from out of state. We have been fortunate enough to fill every position that we have with the exception of one, and that position actually is another shortage area. It is a speech and language pathologist. We haven't been able to identify a full-time speech path yet, but I've been working and talking closely with Christine Hartwig, our Director of Special Services, and we're working on a creative plan to address that. We will have somebody to provide services to the students to make sure that we're in compliance with IEP hours. But again, it's one that the speech and language speech path positions they're very, very hard to come by, very hard to find. I again was talking to another colleague of mine from another district today. Hey, you guys fully staffed? Well, we are, but these 3 areas, and one of them she said was speech path. So, but I'm really happy with the people that we've been able to bring on board and excited to have them be a part of the RHAM community. As I said, Jessica will send out an RSVP for a note to RSVP for convocation. I also just will make sure I mention to people if there are board members that are interested in attending the CAPS convention. That's something that you might want to look at your calendar and see if it would work. Heather attended with me last year. That is, it's generally held the Friday and Saturday prior to the week leading up to Thanksgiving. I don't have the dates. I can let you guys know, but I'll have Jess send some information out of that to people as well. So it's 2 days of professional development for board members and superintendents. And I think you felt it was a worthwhile
I did
to go last year. So
I did.
So that concludes my superintendent's report.
Okay. All right. So that brings us to the approval of minutes. We've got several sets to approve. So the first one, do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the special June 4th, 2024 Board of Education meeting?
So moved. Scott Soya.
Scott Soyat. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Mike Sharon.
Mike Sharon, seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anyone abstain? Pam, are you all set?
I'm all set.
All right. That motion passed. So the second set of minutes, do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the regular June 10th, 2024 Board of Education meeting?
So moved, Gabe Marks.
Gabe Marks, do we have a second?
I'll second Amy Rominger.
Amy Romanchek? Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All set.
Opposed?
It's hard to hit the button fast enough. Sorry.
I'm watching you.
I know.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain?
A comment about the board clerk. These are great summaries of public comments. These are really well done.
Okay, so that motion passed. And the final one, do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the special July 9th, 2024 Board of Education meeting?
So moved, Scott Soya.
Scott Soyette. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Joe Coletti.
Joe Coletti. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Anyone abstain? The motion passed. Okay, so now that brings us to the consent agenda.
So there's two items in the consent agenda. One of them is per the REA contract, a leave of absence request that comes from a teacher needs to be approved by the full board. I did have a couple of people ask me, why does this have to get approved by the full board? Why can't it be an administrative decision? I don't disagree with that in any way, shape, or form, but I'm obligated to follow the contract. The contract says it needs to be approved by the board. That leave of absence is for personal reasons. It really wouldn't be appropriate to discuss it, but what I can tell you is that I fully support this request for a leave of absence and encourage the board to approve it as a part of the consent agenda. The second piece of the consent agenda is, as a part of my contract, I am required to get authorized by the school board to attend the National Superintendent's Conference that comes at a cost of greater than $1,000. I am not sure what the full cost of the conference would be. It would include the registration, which I do know is about $785 and plus flight and travel expenses. But this is a conference that the board may recall I was approved to attend in my first year. I didn't go because just there was a whole lot of things going on and it fell right in the middle of budget season, which was really problematic. I knew that the conference wouldn't work for my schedule next year, so I didn't even bother asking, to be perfectly honest with you. But they've moved the date to be happening later in the year, and it would be more conducive with my schedule, and I'm hoping to be able to attend that professional development opportunity.
Okay. All right. So do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Okay, that was Drew Goffin,
Second, Scott Soya.
Scott Soyette. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay, and that passed. So it brings us to old business. The first item is the high school, the RHAM High School as a school of choice. So Joe, does that go to?
Do you want me to do it now, or do you want
Yeah.
to do it during the?
No, I think because
Committee
it's a separate agenda item, so I think it'd be good for us to discuss it now.
Okay. So we had a meeting with the superintendent of Colchester Schools and one of their board members as well, just to go over logistics of how they take on students from other towns, everything that entails. We didn't go over too much about the costs, correct?
Mhm.
Everything from them was positive. They said that they would go out to more districts and look for more students if they can. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I had it swayed me very much into
Yeah,
thinking positively about it.
one of the things that during previous conversations that we've had at the board level about RAM being a school of choice is you have your state identified number. We just call it a per pupil expenditure, right? It's a number that's developed through a formula that I won't even try to understand. And it's approximately $21,000. I think last year was what it was, roundabout there. If we charge $21,000 or try to charge a town $21,000, nobody will choose RAM as a school of choice. Typically, the tuition amount is set lower than what the PPE is. People might perceive it as significantly lower. The number that was proposed to us, I believe, last fall was somewhere in the neighborhood of $14,500, somewhere in the neighborhood. Now, that is a rate that can be negotiated, but I do remember that there was concern on the part of the board of the optics of that, right? So we're paying $21,000 for a RAM kid, but another town is coming in and paying $14,500 or $15,000 for a student from a different town. The cost of that district's charge varies. It could be as low as $12,000. It could be as high as $15,000 or $16,000. Again, that is something that if the board ultimately decides to do this, we would negotiate that with the town that wants to send kids to us. But again, the concern coming out of this group was, well, how is that perceived in your town? One of the things I think Joe and Amy, you're a part of this group, and Drew, you're a part of this group too, is basically it was, do we hear about that from time to time? Yes. Or have we heard about that very sporadically from members of the community? Yes. But it is not a widespread concern based off of their experiences. Because one of the things that's not factored into it is transportation costs. Transportation costs are pretty significant. And the other thing is special education costs. Special education costs would be identified on top of whatever that base rate of pay is. So any student who comes to us from a sending district, we essentially would have price tags to go along with different services that they receive, or certain prices to go along with services that they receive. And that would be added on top of special education costs. I'm sorry, on top of the base tuition costs. Again, this is a contract that would exist from year to year. We at any time could say, hey, this isn't working for us and we're going to pull out. Typically when that happens, the students who have started off in a school of choice get to finish their school experience in a school of choice. We talked a little bit about having a cap or not having a cap. And what I mean by that is a cap on the number of students. I believe that Colchester said that they do have a cap on the number of students, but that cap actually is set by the sending town. The sending towns will say, we're not going to allow any more than 10 kids or any more than 15 kids come. We haven't discussed a cap. If that's something that ultimately this board decides to do, we could certainly discuss it. One of the things that came up, and Dr. Brisgell was in the meeting as well, is RAM High School was built for a significantly larger student population than what we currently have. I think at one point we had 1,200 to 1,300 students. Don't quote me on the number, but it was somewhere in that neighborhood. And at this time, getting an additional 15 or 20 kids from a sending district would not have any impact on space. And at this time, it wouldn't have any impact on staffing. That certainly could happen at some point. But we also know that our enrollment is going to increase over time anyways. We're projected to increase by a significant amount over the next 10 years. Just trying to think if there's anything else that we discussed.
Well, it was very positive, the financial benefit to the.
Correct.
I mean, both the superintendent and the board member were very positive about getting these students in. And a lot of them were, contributing to the environment as well. So
Sure.
They got involved and so forth. So it was very positive.
How long has Colchester been a school of choice?
I think for a fairly decent amount of time. I can get you that information to send it out to the board members.
What towns participate?
I think Norwich might be a choice. Thank you, Dr. Cerruti, for acknowledging that. I don't know.
Basra.
Basra is as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Colchester.
smaller ones. And I don't know if Norwich was still going to be because of the pricing.
They might.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I think they
were
did talk about
Yeah.
that.
that. Yeah.
That's right.
So smaller districts.
So, so ultimately coming out of that committee meeting, and correct me if I'm mischaracterizing this, was we wanted to come back to the board as a whole and say, what information would you like us to try to get? You know, the subcommittee can try to get any updated or different information so that ultimately the board as a group can make a decision as far as to whether or not this is something that you'd like to do. I'm not saying this has to happen, but we did have the superintendent from Columbia do a presentation for us last November at a finance subcommittee meeting. And that is something that I'm confident that she would be willing to do if there was an interest in having her come and do a presentation to the full board. That might be something that you all would find beneficial. I think that if it's something we're going to do, I don't want to put pressure on anybody, but we need to make a decision probably in the November-ish time period so that there can be some surveys given out to members of that community to say, are you interested in going to RHAM, right? So that we could include that in our anticipated budget for, does it fall under revenue?
Yeah.
Yep. So it falls under revenue. So we'd want to make sure that we included that.
Can we come up with a number that removes transportation costs from
It's a great question.
on a student-by-student basis?
Didn't I
You
email
did
this?
about
Yeah, there's-
17,000.
So, yeah, so we went through a calculation last year and came up with a number in the neighborhood of $17,000.
So the 21 was reduced down to about 17.
Correct. We worked closely with, and I can't remember the person from the state, but we got some input from somebody from the state. Thank you, Kevin Chambers from the state. And Eva worked her magic and came up with a number. And interestingly enough, those of you who are on the board would remember Eric Shevchenko, who was definitely a finance guy. Mm-hmm. And Eric did the numbers on his own and they matched up, right? Okay. He said, this is what I got. And I said, interestingly enough, that's what we got. So yeah, $17,000 is about what it was.
I think that's helpful from a perspective.
And that's a year old at this point. Just keep that
fair. I mean, I ratio the numbers anyway. So,
and we know what Bolton and what's the other school they go to?
E.O. Smith High School.
Smith. We know what they are charging Columbia, correct?
Yeah. So I think when they came to us and proposed the price that they had proposed for us, and again, this was last fall, they were paying $14,542.55 per student. And that was approximately a 4% increase over the previous year. I think that's an important context to know that we do build in an adjustment from year to year, or could build that in. Their dollar amount with Bolton was a different rate. It was $13,870.13. Similarly, approximately a 4% increase per year. That's the numbers that they gave us from last fall.
So that's kind of an interesting issue. It's the same school choice, but depending on who fed in, or do I have it reversed?
No, it's different. It's different schools of choice. So Columbia students who go to Bolton pay about, what did I say, $1,200 less than Bolton kid. I'm sorry, than Columbia kids that go to E.O. Smith. That's why generally, when this process happens, you all may remember some board members from when I first came on back in 2022, 23, we were approached by Franklin as hey, we'd love to do this with you. We'd love RHAM to be a high school of choice for us. We weren't looking at the number of students. I think they were anticipating maybe 4 or 5 kids per year, but their graduating class of 8th graders is like 18 to 20 kids. From what Columbia said to us was they would anticipate approximately 20 kids. That would be their best guess at this point. And they said, we think that number would grow over time. But I refer back to the Franklin scenario because basically what Franklin said to me was, as long as you charge the same amount of money that NFA charges, because that is Franklin's most expensive receiving district. They said, as long as you kept your tuition at that dollar amount or less, we would make you a school of choice. But from their perspective, it didn't make financial sense for us to be a school of choice and charge more. I don't know what the dollar amount we could charge Columbia. That would again be a negotiation. I don't think that $14,500 is as hard and fast. I think that there is more desire on their part. Now, again, I can't say for certain, but that's the sense that I've gotten is, well, that's what we pay them, but that's not necessarily what we, I think if we came in and said 21 grand, they'd say, we're not going to do that. But I think they'd be open to a negotiation that would be fair.
Are there any schools that just say, this is the price if you want to come here, so it doesn't really matter what town you're from, this is the price? It seems to me a little strange that the schools are coming to us saying, can I go to school there and here's what I'm willing to pay? Where I feel like we should be saying, we've got this great school and here's the cost. If you would like to come here, we'd love to have you.
Well, I don't know if there are districts. I don't know if I think that there's possible that there could be receiving districts that set different rates of pay. I don't know if districts set different rates of tuition rates for different districts, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I think part of it would be what's the cost? What is the per pupil cost for the receiving district? And what is the ability to pay from the sending districts? I think it's going to be harder for smaller school districts to pay higher tuition rates because their ability to pay might not be as much. Their tax base might not be as much. Their tuition rate might be lower. So I don't know the answer to that question specifically. But again, we could do whatever.
We could choose that.
We could.
We could say, okay, this sounds like a good rate for Columbia, and that's our number. Yeah, that's that. And if Franklin wants to come along, or I don't know who else around here is sending students, but
it's just like any basic negotiation. The sender gives an estimate, and the receiver gives an estimate, and there's an agreement in between that there is. But yeah.
So how do we advance this effort if we choose to do so?
I'm sorry, with the
How do
rain.
we advance this effort if we choose to do so?
Yeah, that's what my question is too.
Yeah.
It seems like this is a win-win,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
So
to me anyway.
I mean, it really depends on how much further you want the subcommittee or myself to go with this. I mean, I could certainly reach out to Barbara Wilson, superintendent from Columbia, and said, hey, there is an interest on my board's behalf. They'd like for you to come and do a presentation. Or I could say, there is an interest on my board's behalf. There's not a need to do a presentation, but let's start talking about what the tuition rate is. I mean, that could be where we are.
I see that as a viable option.
Yeah.
Is this something that you'd like to make a motion on as a board?
Yeah.
To pursue having discussions with Columbia to sort out what we think that tuition might be?
Yeah.
Do we have to do like a draft contract first?
So I think the first thing for us to do is engage in conversation, more substantive conversation with Columbia. If we want to make that a motion, it could be maybe to authorize the superintendent of schools to engage with the superintendent of Columbia schools to start discussing possible tuition rates for RHAM High School being a school of choice.
So I'll make a motion that the board authorize the superintendent to engage in discussion with Columbia's superintendent on the discussion of cost and also number of students who might be interested in
Yeah.
and any other issues that arise.
Right.
Oh, Eva is, okay.
She's great.
All right, so Drew made a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Scott Sawyer, second. Any other discussion on it?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we have a sense of the marginal cost. If you can give us some sense of, it doesn't cost us $21,000 to add one more student, and it doesn't cost us $42,000 to add two more students. It costs us something, but do we have any sense of that? And I assume it's well under $14,000 that we would pay in general. Of course, you hit those thresholds where you need to increase staffing, but do we have any numbers like that?
I don't think we could calculate that. Because that's it kind of, you, as you said, adding 1, 2, 3, and even 20 students would be hard to calculate a cost, because as long as it doesn't impact our staffing, it really doesn't come at a cost. Well, let me say this. Could there be some costs associated with athletics because we as a school don't charge our kids, but we could build into the contract that maybe Columbia students that participate in athletics are doing a pay per season or pay to play, which we eliminated for RHAM students and RHAM residents, but that could be something that we build into the contract, right? Again, special education could certainly come at a cost because you could look at requiring additional services, but that's anticipated and it's built into the contract that there's a prices associated with different services. So it really,
Yes, it all depends on the electives that they
correct.
So the electives that they choose, because it depends on, so are you going to block kids out of taking other classes? So that might be where a cost comes in, because we might have to open a different section up. But again, that's something that the high school administration would have to weigh in on.
Yeah. And, it varies from class to class and it varies from content to content area, but there's space available right now. And we just to make sure.
I didn't think we actually had those numbers. I didn't know if there's something we could even consider calculating, but probably.
It would be hard to do.
Okay, and go ahead.
Well, all I would say is, whenever the first official meeting of this discussion takes place, that it be fully communicated with the board. I'm assuming it will be, but I'm just reminding you guys, make sure that happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I would anticipate having that conversation prior to our next meeting and at least seeing where we stand. I might not have a fully vetted contract, but I can certainly make some progress.
Okay, so could you read the motion again, Ava?
So authorize superintendent of regional school district 8 to engage in discussions with Columbia's superintendent for cost and number of students and other issues that may arise.
Okay.
Related to RHAM High School being a school of choice.
Right. So this is specific to Columbia.
Correct.
But would we consider opening up to Franklin the same year? They wanted it. I know that discussion went nowhere, but if we're going to become a school of choice, would we go to them and say, hey, so we try an experiment with Columbia first?
My recommendation would be, let's try it with one school district first, see how successful that might be. And then if there's an appetite to expand those partnerships with other districts, we can do that.
Okay.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay, the motion passes. Okay. Next up is the increasing the educator diversity plan.
So the district was informed a couple of weeks ago that the increasing educator diversity plan that we were required to submit to the state of Connecticut was conditionally approved and not fully approved. I think it's important to provide a context that I will tell you that a large percentage of my colleagues that I've heard from both locally, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but this is inclusive of Hebron and I know Marlboro as well. I'm not quite sure of Andover. Were also conditionally approved. And I need to make revisions to our increasing educator diversity plan and resubmit it to the state for submission. We did get feedback from the state. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. It was not very helpful. It was, this has been a frustrating process. As everybody knows, I've said this before, I value having a diverse educator workforce, but I could tell you that a plan that we are being forced to create is not going to have the impact because that they hope for this to be, simply because of the fact that most diverse educators, and I'm making a gross generalization when I say this, really that I've spoken to have a desire to work in diverse school populations because they want to have an impact on a diverse student population. So I think when you consider the dynamics of the makeup of our student population, you look at the dynamics of the makeup of the communities that we serve, this is just very frustrating for many of my colleagues across the state, that we're having to go through this iterative process. It's been a struggle for a lot of us. I've spoken to the superintendents, or been in communication with the superintendents in both Hebron and Marlboro about maybe taking a whack at revising our plans with a regionalized approach and resubmitting. But what I do need to do is, and there's a proposed motion in your notes for this, is to be authorized to make revisions to our increasing educator diversity plan and resubmit it to the state in order to gain full approval. And I would plan on working collaboratively with members of the administrative team, as well as, again, the superintendents from the other districts. Just to give you even greater context, I was in touch with the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents Executive Director, and I said, do you have a number for how many people were actually approved? She said, I don't have that, but I'll try to get it for a number of districts. But what I could tell you is they did put a call out to districts that were fully approved to say, if your plan was fully approved, could you share it with us so that we can share it with other districts as exemplar plans? I think 3 people responded with plans that were approved. Now, I'm not saying that only 3 plans were approved, but it just shows you that of 100 and some odd districts across the state of Connecticut, there's a lot of districts that are going through what we're going through.
Do they have a specific thing about our plan that
they provided some written feedback, which I found to be very vague and not very helpful. They also offered office hours on very specific days to set up and schedule meetings with school districts so that you could sit down with a consultant who was one of the reviewers and get specific feedback from them on your plan. On the 3 days that they've had so far, I've not been able to figure out how to sign up. And I go to sign up and there's no spaces available. And there's one more day left, and I'm going to try to get in on that day if I possibly can. But I'll give you a couple of examples. That they said, each aspect or each action plan had to have what they called like an owner who owned the responsibility of doing this. And in the plan that I had submitted, I said, the owners could be the administrators, superintendent, HR director. Like I identified a number, and they said, well, that should only be one person. One person should own each part of the plan. Okay, well, that's not the way that it works here. Our administrators know that we are kind of jacks of all trades. We have to do a little bit of everything and anything. So anyways, you can probably sense my frustration, but again, I want to make sure that I'm clear on this for the public. I value having a diverse teacher workforce. I just think that the exercise, this was well-intentioned when it was an idea that, we should have all school districts do this plan. But literally, they gave us a spreadsheet and we have to put everything into a very specific box. So that we're basically, and they've given us now, I'm just going to say, I'm just going to take what somebody else has utilized as an exemplar plan and I'll make it work for us and I'll submit that. Because this is really just checking a box.
Yeah, can I ask what we'll call it a penalty? That's what the state likes to do. What would the penalty for not having a fully complied with plan?
It's a great question. I have no idea. I have until October 1st to revise our plan and resubmit it, and I'm going to work to get that done. Like I said, I do have some plans that were approved that were provided to us, and I'll utilize those as models and see if we can make it happen. But just again, the reason that the motion that I'm asking for you to make and approve is to authorize me to make revisions and resubmit is if I resubmit on October 1st and it comes back as conditionally approved, I'm just going to go back to it again and resubmit it. Mm-hmm. I will tell you that like in some school districts, the motion was we approve the plan as presented and authorize the superintendent of schools to make any necessary revisions based on state feedback until it is ultimately approved fully. So some people had the foresight to recognize that this was going to happen. Mm-hmm. I was a little naive and thought, well, this is a pretty good plan. The state should approve it. And apparently that was not the case. So
So I'll make motion that we,
It's on that.
Okay, to authorize the superintendent to make revisions to the increasing educator diversity plan and resubmit to the State Department of Education to be fully approved. And the first motion will be
I'll
Scott Soyette, a second.
I'll second that.
Mike Sharon. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anyone abstain? And the motion passes. That will bring us to new business. First up is a bleacher donation.
So in your board packets is a document that is pulled from our policies around gifts and donations. It is called a gift intention form. It was filled out and provided to me through Dan Trudeau by MECA, the Marlboro Elementary Child Care Association. And they are offering us a donation of a gift of approximately $24,000 for bleachers, primarily which would be utilized at the competition field as away bleachers for opposing fans and both adults and students to sit on the other side of the field and cheer their teams on to victory when they are competing against RHAM athletic teams. A board member, when this was in the packet, had said, just curious, why is this something that an elementary group is donating? Well, from what Dan said to me is, this is a group that does this quite often. They find worthwhile causes throughout the community to say this is a good use of our money. I believe that some people associated with this organization are also parents, athletes' parents in the RHAM community. And I will tell you that there have been times where when you have RHAM fans, both students and adults, and away fans, students and adults, sitting on the same set of bleachers, things can get tense sometimes. Things can get a little contentious. And I think that this was their way of saying, well, let's see how we can creatively solve this problem. We have the space to do it. The bleacher capacity, I believe, is 100 spectators. It is a portable bleacher system. So if we're in a situation where we needed to move it for some reason and needed to move it to a different part of campus, we would have the ability to hook it to a trailer hitch and fold it up and haul it over to a different part if that was necessary. Because of the capacity of being more than 99 spectators, we do have to get some permits from the town, but I know Michael Schweihofer is already working on that. And the cost for that is something that we would incur, but it's fairly nominal. Again, I think this is a wonderful gesture on the part of the Marlboro Elementary Child Care Association, and there's a recommended motion in your board notes to accept the donation from the group. And I would certainly, either myself or Heather, if you wanted to do it as the board chair, would be to communicate a sincere thank you to this group for the very kind donation that they've made to us.
So do we have a motion to accept a donation of bleachers by the Marlboro Elementary Child Care Association valued at approximately $24,000?
So moved.
Mike Sharon. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Amy Romanchuk. Any other discussion?
I just actually have one question. Do we have to build anything on that side of
I don't
the
think we have to do a pass.
So if I remember correctly, there's asphalt down, like loose gravel down already.
Okay,
I don't think we need to do anything except get the permit.
so the only cost is going to be the permit. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, and as Colin said, I mean, this is really great. And it's really kind of nice to see, the elementary schools sort of looking at their future, where they're going to be, where they're going, because the towns are all going to end up here. But so thank you to the association. So all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay, motion passes. That will bring us to the high school mobile phone policy. It's in closure 10.2.
So at our June meeting, I shouldn't say at our June meeting, after our June meeting, when we had some people share some thoughts and feelings around a mobile phone policy for the high school, Heather and I had a conversation and thought it would be a good idea to include this topic as an agenda for this month's meeting. I've asked Dr. Briziel, the high school principal at RHAM, to put together a brief presentation of the current cell phone policy and I'm making air quotes when I say policy because it's not an uppercase policy, which I consider to be board policy. It's a lowercase policy, more of an administrative procedure or regulation. So she's going to talk about what we currently have in place to provide a context as to what the current expectations are for students and their mobile devices, and then we can certainly discuss this further. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Good evening to all of you. I'm glad the rain has stopped, so I don't have to use my teacher voice. But if it does try to compete, I will start to project. So obviously, we know that this is a hot topic and certainly has been a topic in education for a while. And, you know, I had the pleasure of being able to actually have a conversation with Scott Leslie today, the former principal and superintendent. And he said, you know, this cell phone policy was really initially created as a iPod policy back in the day. So this kind of brings you back to, you know, we've been, you know, seeing the growth of technology, the impact it has in our schools, both bad and good. And we just try to keep up and we try to figure out what works best for our students. And certainly we know that it does differ among grade levels. And I don't think that where we are is so wholly different where a lot of high schools are, but I do know that we are all in flux and thinking about where we want to move forward. So I think for all of you, it would be great for you to know where we are right now so that we know if we want to move forward or not, what that would mean, what things would we be thinking about. So as I said, this policy has been around since people have been walking around with iPods and cell phones. And, you know, we have made slight changes to that in the last year, school year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But really the initial policy that we had previous to the 23-24 school year was one that did start with a statement that recognized the fact that technology can be a tool in the classroom and that it could be used as a way for students to be able to access information, fill out forms, what have you, whatever it might be. But as we know, we did become a one-to-one school. I want to say 2018-ish, probably. Obviously, we know we were a one-to-one school during COVID, and that served a purpose, right? We definitely knew that having that technology in the hands of students did make us able to access them even when they were home. But, you know, a lot of the things that students can do on their Chromebooks, they could do on their phones and vice versa. So technology has certainly creeped into our classrooms in several different ways. At the beginning of the school year last year, the 23-24 school year, we obviously knew that there were concerns on behalf of the faculty about how students may be using their phones in the classroom or how they didn't want them to be using them, how they were becoming increasingly a bigger distraction. And with the fact that we are a one-to-one school, we have some latitude in how we want to approach the phone policy because it's not necessarily something that a student absolutely needs in order to be successful in the classroom. So we didn't want the policy to highlight it as a tool per se. So we wanted to take that language out. And we wanted to be sure that everybody was on the same page, that if a student was in violation of the phone policy, that we had a clear, you know, response to that, and that it would be consistent across all classrooms and throughout the school. We also discussed the fact that some teachers have different ways of managing their classrooms. And with that, you know, we like to give our teachers and empower them to run their classrooms the way that they see fit and most successful for them and fits with their expectations and their personalities and such. But that there could be a reason, and this had been building already in the school, where teachers would ask students to put them in a box or to put them in if you've seen shoe racks, you know, those clear shoe racks, that's become a popular item in a classroom where teachers may ask students to put them in there so that when they come into the classroom, they're not necessarily in their hands, they're not on their person, they're not a distraction in that moment while they're in the classroom, but they would still be there for them when they leave class and be able to use outside of the classroom. So there were a lot of things that we were trying to balance, and we wanted to get everyone's voices. So during the staff meeting, the first one last year during actually the second day back, of which we always have faculty meetings the day after convocation, we discussed, the things that people were concerned about, what they might want to see change. And so I said, well, I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and make some changes in the current policy, and then we'll send it back out to everybody and see if there's further feedback, and then, be able to sort of polish that up so that we could then deliver it to the students and have a consistent policy that we were enforcing that school year. So we did that. And in fact, I would like to highlight that the science department was definitely influential in sort of creating our baseline of what we were going to send back out to the staff. They spent some time in their department meeting, trying to sort of wordsmith what they thought might be some good changes, and sort of echoed and reflected the things that we had talked about. And that really became the basis for what we then created as a final policy that we then put in the student handbook, because the student handbook is updated each school year. And then last year we had, for the first time, grade level meetings at the beginning of the year where the administration and others met with the classes to talk about expectations, updated rules, talking about this particular cell phone policy and other such things, so that they were aware and clear about what the new, if they saw it as new. And especially it is new when they are coming to the high school, because the middle school, if you don't know, does have the students keep them in their lockers so that they aren't with them during the school day. And that is a pretty typical policy to have in a middle school. That has not been the case at the high school. And if we asked them to put them in their lockers, they'd say, what locker? Because even though they get a locker, they do not use them. It's become uncool, I would assume, in their world. And, they like to carry everything they own with them all at once. And there has been an effort made across the board where students aren't necessarily carrying around the biggest textbooks, as you might have seen in the past. Sometimes a lot of us have moved to, more online articles and or other printed materials that they don't necessarily carry around with them every day and all day. So that, I think back in the day, that was a big deal. Like, what was the study and the research on what these backpacks were doing to our kids' bodies? So, so we try to stay away from that. And so, and I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of them come in with shorts and t-shirts throughout the year, even when there's a snowstorm. So jackets being in the locker is no longer a thing either. So anyhow, I stray from the real issue here. So what became our student cell phone policy and remains our policy currently right at the moment starts off with the fact that it says the use of cell phones and electronic devices is prohibited during class unless otherwise directed by the teacher. Cell phones should not be a distraction and detract from the learning and teaching environment. And that was a change. What I said before was that it was really focused on it being a tool and that it could be used in the classroom and all that. We kind of took that language out to sort of steer away from suggesting use in the classroom and being very clear that the expectation is that they would not be using them in the class unless it's, for some reason the teacher found that to be appropriate. And then under that, we say that teachers may choose to store cell phones in a designated location in the classroom during class time, and students are asked to comply. So as I said, some teachers use the box. I've seen teachers, they'll stand there in the door and they'll greet the kids as they come in, and they dump their cell phones in there. If they don't see them dump it in there, they might question them and say, no cell phone today? And they're like, oh yeah, haha, I was hoping I was gonna be able to get by today. Whatever the case might be. Or, a student, for the most part, I've seen, at least anecdotally, that seems to work very well. And they know that that's the expectation. And of course, if for whatever reason the student didn't give over a cell phone, if they were seen pulling it out, then the teacher was like, you know what you need to do. So then also it says that students may use cell phones and electronic devices before school, after school, during study hall, in the cafeteria, during lunch, and during passing time in the hallways. So this is different from a no cell phone policy in that we're saying there are times in their day that they can use the phone. We do know that, our students are becoming adults. They're not there yet, but we're trying to prepare them for that. And we do recognize that they might have jobs or other responsibilities in which having access to their phone at some point, during these times would be seen as appropriate. However, I know that that's not necessarily what, I think that every school necessarily agrees with. They've seen different ways of doing this. And some say you don't use it during any of those times either. But in our policy with what we agreed to last year, that's what we said that they can do with their phones. They do have a 46-minute lunch, which unfortunately I would love to see them spending eating and just talking to each other. I will say that, obviously they do use their phones, and it's funny, sometimes you see them sitting at the table together and yet nobody's talking. They're all looking at their phones, right? And I'm like, are you communicating with each other on these phones? Or is it, so it is, something that I think that they obviously do have an attraction to, and when they can use it, they want to. I will not pretend that there are not students who try to use them in class or in any other places where they shouldn't. But we've made it very clear that if a teacher and or administrator were to ask them to put it away, that they would need to comply. It also says that students must demonstrate responsible use of cell phones and electronic devices at all times while in school. Of course, we hope that they would do this outside of school too, but we can't control that. For example, students must be aware of their surroundings. So like try not to text and talk, or try to text and walk, which we see a lot. And that they, as they're walking through the hallways, they're being mindful of where they're going and how they're impacting others around them. Also that students must respect the privacy rights of others and may not make audio or video recordings of others without the permission of the individuals being recorded. And this includes teachers, peers, anybody else in the building. If we get word that they're not complying with that, we do address it, and there are consequences for that, especially if they violated someone else's rights or rights of privacy. And then students may never use electronic devices to create or disseminate content that may be hurtful to others. So this definitely falls into the category of bullying and or, just posting things about someone that is inflammatory or unkind or, against Title IX or anything like that where, people are protected. Anything that they do on their phone is something that they are held accountable for and responsible for, and that we do implement consequences and try to remedy the situation and try to make everybody whole in the situation when we find that that is the case. And then lastly, it says staff members who find students in violation of these regulations are to confiscate the device and give it to the main office personnel or ask an administrator to confiscate the device. I would say that, there are times where a student does not want to comply to that. And if a student does not comply to giving their phone, it is considered insubordination, which in our handbook is a suspendable offense. So, sometimes it can veer into that category. But if it's just a typical cell phone violation and the student is responding appropriately, if it's the first offense, the device is returned to the student directly at the end of the school day. If it's a subsequent offense, it does require a parent or guardian to come to the school to retrieve it. This then puts sort of, obviously we tell the parents when there's a first offense, but when it becomes a second or third, it does sort of put the onus on the parents to have to, take time out of their day to come over and get it. And that usually has more of an impact on whether or not a student chooses to continue to engage in that behavior. And then, of course, there may be additional disciplinary consequences depending on what the situation is. And, we encourage teachers to write office referrals when they might have an issue in their classroom surrounding phones. And we do respond to those and make sure that we help remedy the situation when we are aware. So that is the current cell phone policy as it stands. And certainly I'm open to any questions or comments that you may have.
I have a question, Pam.
Mhm.
This is the policy that was in effect last school year as well?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. And so I think we received a fair amount of feedback, both public comment as well as during the meeting with regard to mixed reviews on whether or not this policy is successful in its current format.
Yeah, and I will say that in its current format, it's not very different from the previous formats. As I said, it was just a few tweaking, but the whole of this is pretty similar to what we've been having over the years. So yeah, it may be time for us to revisit it in a different way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I heard earlier in the meeting that the governor's office is going to be providing recommendations.
We should have it this week, Wednesday, I believe. And then if anybody wants to participate in the CAVE discussion on it to hear what other boards are thinking. But I think kind of at this point, we just sort of have to wait to see what the guidance is coming out of the governor's office before we, there's no point in us making any moves now.
CAVE thing is what, Thursday?
The CAVE thing is Thursday. You should have received an email for it with a login. It's at noon. Whatever the governor's going to put out is coming out on Wednesday.
And we're pretty sure it's gonna come out with let's get these things out of the schools altogether.
I don't think that.
I don't think so. I think it's going to be recommended guidance, but
Well,
not
right.
policy.
Yeah, no, but that sounds like the guidance from the state, from what I've read about the interviews, is that Lamont is looking to, basically, you don't need these during school.
I would be hard pressed from my position. I'd be hard pressed for them to for there to be something so restrictive as you can't bring them to school anymore. I think that's unenforceable. I will tell you that I think there's the possibility that the guidance could be to do something similar to what we actually have here, is that the school should set very clear parameters around when you should have your cell phones out and when it's not okay to have your cell phones out. That I will tell you, there's two school districts, relatively local, Ellington and Manchester, that have had some news around their process and what their expectations are. I've had a meeting with the Ellington superintendent earlier this summer to get an idea of what it was, because they've put out press releases, and their superintendent likes to do press releases. So he did press release on the fact that they're going to this, more restrictive rules around cell phone use. And what I can tell you is what they are seeing as restrictive cell phone use is really no different from what we're doing here. Kids are expected, when they go into class, they put their cell phones in their backpack or put them someplace where the teacher has indicated this is where you're going to put it. And when they leave class, they can take them out and they can access them during the context of passing periods or lunches. I also had a conversation with the superintendent. Actually, we played phone tag for about a week and a half, and I just talked to him today. The superintendent in Manchester, there was an article, I think it was in the Hartford Courant, about Illing Middle School in Manchester, where students are expected to put their phones into these pouches that lock, and students cannot open them during the day. They slide their cell phone in there. They're supposed to put the pouch in their backpack or wherever it is that they put their backpack, and then they cannot access that phone until, I think there's a special magnet that releases the pouch. Those are things, if you've ever attended a relative comedy show in any recent time, that actually comics will actually have patrons who are coming to their comedy shows put their cell phones in these pouches because they don't want their content to be online. Maybe I go to see too many comedy shows, but anyways, try not to judge me. But I will tell you, so in Manchester, it's much more restrictive at the middle school. So I talked to the superintendent this morning. I said, are you planning on doing that at the high school? And he said, yes, for the start of this school year, we are going to provide each kid with a pouch. And the expectation is that when they come in during the context of the morning, they slide their phone in the pouch, they shut the pouch, they cannot access it during the school day. When they leave school, there is some magnet that they walk by, and then they hold their phone up to the pouch up to the magnet, and the magnet then releases the pouch, and then they can access the phone. That I think is, that's as restrictive as I see the governor, because I think, I will tell you that as a parent, I don't know if I would have wanted my kid to not have their phone access at all in school or after, particularly at the high school level, because when you have student athletes who are participating, or kids that are participating in fine and performing arts or any type of after school activity, the ability for parents to communicate with their kids just from a logistics standpoint is kind of important outside of class time. But I would be surprised if the expectation that the guidelines that the governor gives is don't bring those to school at all. They're not.
Right. No, the impression I got was something more like
the pouches.
Manchester's.
Yeah.
So if a teacher has the shoe thing, say, and the students put them in, do they have to silence them too?
Yeah,
or do they go off during the?
Yeah, no, that would be very distracting. But I mean, the expectation is that they are on silent or turned off. That is the same to be true if they just have it in their bag or in their pocket. I mean, obviously, we do not want these to be making noise throughout the classroom period. Now that a kid may forget to do that, something goes off, I think the teacher, reminds them. But obviously, if it's something that they continuously fall short on, it would be something that would be addressed, whether it be teacher-wise or administrative-wise. I mean, I certainly know that there are multiple perspectives on this topic, and I think that every, whether it be a teacher or a student, a parent, administrator, we all have very different probably concerns about no cell phone policy and or the policy that we have, I think you're never going to get everybody on the same page. But I certainly think that it's an opportunity and a time for us to hear what everybody has to say about it, what the majority feels like we need to do that will be best for our students and for our community. I think certainly that being thoughtful about it and having those conversations and making it seem, well, making everyone feel as though that they do have a voice in it, and that whatever we do agree upon in the end is based on the majority consensus and something that we feel is justified and, thought out, researched. I will say that, I've tried to do a fair amount of research on my own. I know that The Anxious Generation is a popular book right now that people are reading, and this is part of what's sort of bringing out the negative side of cell phones, especially for younger children. The majority of the research has been done K through 8, and I think K through 8 schools probably have done a lot more with no cell phone policies. And I think it's natural because that's, I think, a little easier. And for the most part, you have less students coming into the school with phones. But I would say that 100% of our kids come in with a cell phone. And so it is a different landscape. And it is, I think, complicated in that there are a lot of things that can distract our students, and there are a lot of things that we should be trying to help them to self-regulate and to monitor and be responsible about so that they can live here and go on and be productive in a college setting and or work setting or whatever they're choosing to do next. So I think there is a role to play in that. But I do understand completely why a teacher may be frustrated that this is just another layer of distraction, and something that could perhaps engage students better. And so, I don't discredit that. I think that that's a very valid perspective, and they're the ones living this every day, and they certainly are the ones who know their students best in that regard in the classroom and what works for them. So I do think it's an opportunity to hear what everybody has to say. And, I will say, though, that one of the things that I'm curious about is, we did, with this conversation being where it is, we looked into our own history of the discipline around cell phones, because we have it all in Power School. And we had 21 cell phone referrals this past school year, which accounted for 5% of all referrals, which is, a pretty small percentage. And the previous year before, we only had 1%. We had like 7 referrals. Now, I don't think that that's a real true indication of the problems that cell phones do bring to the classroom. I do think that teachers are trying all their tricks and doing everything they can. And some have had created models that have worked very well. And then I think others who might, and the statistics for us show that it's mainly 9th graders. They are transitioning into the high school. They didn't have a phone before. I think it does take a little bit more effort for teachers to get them on board. But, I certainly wouldn't say that, other students aren't creating a problem, just perhaps that's not creating a referral and getting to the office. So I don't want to speak on behalf of teachers in terms of what they're seeing in their classrooms, because they are the experts.
Do you think you'll be discussing this with teachers next week to kind of?
I don't see that happening until we get the policy.
I think for us to do anything moving forward without seeing what the guidelines is doesn't really make sense to me.
So I think to step this, do this in a natural order sequence, just because, obviously we don't want to be creating ideas that aren't supported by that model plan. We don't know how restrictive it is, or what things they might suggest that we're not even thinking about that could be possible. I do want to say that anything that we do, the change cannot be instantaneous. There are going to be things to think through, like students who monitor their sugar levels through their phones with their devices. We have students who, have various things going on in their life where they that there could be, if I think about our conversations, and just even in the last several months, they're like, well, what if a student leaves early, and who has their phone, and do they have their phone, or do they have to go into a classroom and get their phone? Like, if we're collecting phones and or putting them into a pouch or something, well, we don't have a homeroom. So where does that happen and how do they get it back? So like, it's going to have implications in ways that we're probably not even thinking about yet. And it would have to be very thoughtful for it to be successful. So all I say is, or what I hope and suggest is that whatever we do decide is, well thought out, prepared, communicated, and then given us the opportunity to properly implement so that it is sustainable and that it does work and it has the right impact.
Pam, did you have a question?
I did. Penny, I was just wondering, because I know just in general, not necessarily around cell phones, I always know that, teachers often feel that if the policy is a school-wide policy, let's say, that it tends to work better. So when we, when you look at the policy that was created, it's more, some teachers put them in the pouches, some teachers do this, some teachers do that. Has discussion come up about, like, say there are going to be, and I don't even mean the locked pouches with the whatever tab to release it. I don't even mean that. I just mean a place where every single classroom you walk into, every teacher has the same setup. Every phone goes into a holder and every child just takes it at the end of the day. Has there been discussion where it's, and I know, trust me, I don't really want anyone telling me what to do in my classroom for behavior wise, but has there been discussion at all about something along those lines where it's the same thing in every single room?
Yeah, I think certainly that whenever the staff comes together and agrees on something that is going to be consistent and, doesn't change from class to class, certainly will have much more power and impact. And students, I think, respond to that better. At least I know that, let's just be fair. High schoolers have to change every 46 minutes when they go into one classroom, one subject area and doing another and having different classroom expectations. Certainly I've seen it when teachers have come together and said that this is what we're doing as a whole, that does carry more weight, and that the students can't say, well, I get to do this in so-and-so's class and I can't do that in this one and whatever. As you say though, like it's tough because you balance the, trying to empower teachers to run the classrooms that they feel comfortable with and successful with. And I think that that's what we were trying to accomplish last year with this adjustment to the policy. But it doesn't mean that we couldn't get to a point where it is consistently implemented in every classroom.
So what I would say is earlier on in the conversation, I was talking about there's uppercase P and there's lowercase p. And uppercase P I see as Board of Education policy, which sets clear parameters. This is what people are expected to do, students, staff, otherwise, right? Within the context of if the board, Pam, this goes to your question, if that's the desire of the board, for there to be consistent expectations across all of the classrooms, then it should be an uppercase P. It should be a school board policy. Then what should be, the administration should be left to make regulations that would be applicable. It would look differently at RHAM Middle School because the fact that lockers are still used on a regular basis versus how it would be done at the high school. So I think if the board's desire is for it to be clear expectations that are going to be universally applied, it might look different at the middle school and it might look different. We could do that. If that's a desire of the board, we have no problem implementing a policy if that's what the board decides to do.
I think that's what's most appropriate. I don't have a great expectations for what the governor's office is going to put out. They continue to disappoint again and again. So they're likely to do the same here. So I think that it would be in your best interest to proactively come up with a standardized approach that can be implemented at the very beginning of the school year, rather than waiting for the governor's office to delay their response yet again. And then a week into the school year, oh, we're going to institute this new policy, right? It doesn't do anybody any favors.
No, I would not suggest that.
No. So I think that standardization, if the expectation is the same from all 6 of my classes throughout the day, it's very difficult for me to argue with that expectation. And to watch my peers do the same thing as I'm expected to do, I think is going to provide a much easier compliance, right, by the students, right? And I don't want to take the phones away. I think that in my mind, having a pouch where the phones are on the wall when they exit the room, they're right there, grab their phone, they can go about their business, passing from class to class or leaving school early for the day, whatever it happens to be. Because they do require communication with parents, with appointments that they might have, whatever it might be. I would tend to encourage you to proactively come up with something ahead of time and just hope that it aligns with what the governor says. But in reality, they can pound sand.
No, I hear what you're saying, definitely. I just worry a little bit that we literally have students coming into our classrooms in less than a week, or a little over a week, I should say, week from Thursday. And we would definitely have to move fast.
I'm just going to jump in. I understand the desire. Hey, it's a new school year. The unfortunate part is the new school year is a week and a half from now. Mm-hmm. And I think what I said earlier was, I do think that I don't disagree with you. I don't have high expectations. We just talked about the increasing education diversity, like, hey, you got to do this, right? Well-intentioned, but not always well executed, right?
Sure.
And so what I think that we should do, though, is I do think that we should be thoughtful about this, and whether we come up with a school board policy that you all as a board say, this is what we believe should happen. That can happen in a month and a half. And we have periods of time where that gives us some lead up time to communicate expectations. That gives us time to make sure that if we end up getting pouches, we have to procure pouches. We're not going to get those in a week and a half, right?
Yeah.
And so, whether it's at a quarter break or whether it's at a mid-year break in the quarter, like, I think that I do think that it is important that we do it right, as opposed to say, hey, we're going to put something in place for next Thursday, but then what we put in place next Thursday could change in 4 weeks once we've had time to think this out a little bit. I think that I understand, and again, as a parent, I get it. Mm-hmm. As an educator, I get it. I just want to make sure that if we do it, it's something that we do right. And what I could tell you is, I know in the school districts that have gone to more restrictive expectations, it has been something that there's been clear and steady communication with all the stakeholders about, so that they know this is coming and this is what we're going to be expecting.
The framework's already in your policy. It's already there.
Yeah.
So
Joe had a question.
Yes. Is it more, do you know if it's more texting or is it more social media?
I think it's
Or
everything.
both?
And anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is social media restricted on the Chromebooks? Like if they type in facebook.com, is that blocked?
There are certain firewalls that I know that IT can explain better than I ever could.
Okay.
I don't know that, if it's like a particular site or if it's particular language, or I don't know if Eric has.
Eric, do we have those firewalls in place?
Offhand.
Yeah, I don't know which sites in particular are a handful of social media sites.
Okay. Because I'm just thinking, if the kids are texting each other back and forth, then we take away the phones. They're just going to go on the Chromebooks in class, open up Facebook, and Facebook message each other.
Well, certainly that is, an added piece to this where, they're never going to truly be tech free, but I know that teachers have said that they can see better what they're doing on their Chromebooks when they're out on their desks. It's a little harder to hide as, easily as you can slide a phone into your pocket real quick when you see the teacher coming. I will say that kids are creative. They know how to do the things that they want to be able to do. Even when we've restricted cell phone use for a particular child because of several referrals, we've found a little later that they have a burner phone that their parents didn't know about. It is always something that if there's a will, there's a way. But I do think that the majority of our students are pretty compliant. We're very lucky in that way. We have a great community that supports what we're doing and supports the fact that students need to be engaged. So I think, to Dr. McNamara's point, being sure that we do have the community support behind us and that the parents are on board, because they will have as much of an impact on how this works out as what we do here, because we need parents at home to say, we know what is expected of you in school. We enforce that. We expect that of you. If I hear from the school that you're not complying, there's going to be consequences at home too, right? And also, maybe the parents need to be a little savvy and say, I wonder if my child has gotten their hands on some other technology that I'm not aware of, or, and so if you do if you even start to dive into the research a little bit, it does talk about that, marriage between what schools are doing and what parents are doing, and then, and together being able to really have the impact on the student. So that's why I say the slower, more thoughtful approach, I think is in our best interest, because anybody that has been successful with this, anybody who writes anything about this saying this is how you should do this, it doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what your policy needs to look like, but they're very clear that if you don't have buy-in from everybody and you don't have communication and sort of that warning phase where people can kind of wrap their brains around it and get on board, and then helping the teachers feel very secure and supported in whatever it is that we're implementing, so that they feel like they know quickly what their responses are going to be if X, Y, or Z happens, and that they feel as though that they have the support not only of the administration but of the parents as well, because we know it can get tricky when one of us is not on the same page, right? So I've had parents where we've called and said, your child's phone has been collected again for the third time in the week. We need you to come pick the phone up. And they say, I can't come pick it up. I don't leave work until 5. Your building's closed. I can't do that. And I understand it's an inconvenience and it's not something that they necessarily want to have to do. So again, if they're not on board with that being the case, after a certain point, if the parent hasn't picked up the phone, we really technically can't keep holding on to personal property for an extended period of time without the parents being in line with what our thinking is.
Pam, do you want to have the final say before we move on?
Yes, I just, I appreciate all of that, and I agree that it needs to be rolled out the right way. I would just suggest 2 things: that possibly we give families a heads up that the governor might be coming out with some other guidelines, and that the board is looking at possibly changing our policy. So that gives a heads up, because I appreciate wanting to roll it out correctly and slowly and so forth, but I also heard those teachers at the end of the school year, and I know that they're looking at us for help. And I would also I would hope that administration can and will communicate with staff that we are, taking this seriously and looking at it and trying to come up with thoughtful solutions that will work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Excuse me, Heather, I'm so sorry, but we're all forgetting that they can do most of this on their wristwatch. So we're already behind on the technology when we take away the phones. Like we're at the iPod stage.
Well, I think, Penny, thank you for putting the policy together. I think, that's an excellent point, Kirsten. I think we'll see what the governor comes out with later this week. I think it could go back to the policy committee for consideration on whether you want to have this, what did you call it? The capital P policy or the small P policy? And kind of figure out, but I also think Pam's right. We should be starting to message to parents that we're looking at this. This is going to change. Something's going to change, and they'll have opportunities to have input. But for now, we'll see what Wednesday brings, and I'm going to guess we'll go back to the policy committee and ask them to kind of assess it and figure out where we want to be. And Penny, your policy is fine, right?
Middle school has it a little easier. They get to put.
Yeah, so we'll probably, invite you to come and have input on that too. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And like I said, this is not an easy problem, so I appreciate everyone's thought and time.
All right.
Assuming if we're actually writing a capital P policy, it's not going to be something that we're going to put in effect before the next school year. Unless there's some real insistence otherwise, I think we would go with something that we have. And, because like somebody, I can't remember who said it, but trying to change this mid-year.
Yeah.
Well, it depends what the change is.
Yeah, sure, but
right. Yeah. So we seem to be focused a lot on the disruptive quality of phones in the classroom, right? That seems to be, and that is a huge concern. but there's also the overall health of our students.
Yeah.
And the fact that they choose not to interact with their peers at lunch, or they walk in front of a moving car while they're texting, or so forth. So there are considerations here that are beyond just the sort of classroom health issue.
And I really would encourage everybody to dial in on Thursday to the CAPE thing. It's just interesting to hear the other perspectives of the other school districts. And there's certainly more work to come on this. So I'm going to keep us moving along though in our agenda. We are at 10.3, and that is the personnel report, which is enclosure 10.3 in your packet.
Yeah, so there's 4 resignations that I'll share. We have Amy Golis, who has been an English teacher since August 24th, 2009, resigned effective July 31st. Elise Thompson, math teacher for RHAM High School, resigned effective June 30th. She had been employed by the district since August 27th, 2018. Maria Spadabowski, special ed teacher for RHAM Middle School, resigned effective July 26, 2024. She had been employed by the middle school since August of 2010. And finally, Katie Cafazzo, speech path for RHAM High School, resigned effective June 30th, 2024. She had been employed for the district since August 28th, 2023. And that concludes my personnel report.
Okay.
So you said there were only 1 vacancy going in. So does this mean you filled the 3 resignations?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Summer facilities projects update. It's enclosure 10.4. Is that going to go to you?
No, Michael Schleihofer is virtually attending the meeting. And Michael puts together this memo, which highlights the variety of summer facilities projects that have taken place. There was a lot this year, but I'll turn it over to Michael, and he's just going to give a high-level overview. We might not touch upon all of these different things because, as you can see, it is a comprehensive list, but he'll maybe touch on some of the larger projects.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. So, reviewing the capital projects, basically we had a total of almost 14 projects that were capital funded, either from previous year that were rolled forward or this current budget year. 12 of the 14 projects will be closing out and will be completed by the start of school. Pending one would be the cameras over by the maintenance garage. And the other one is the building survey, which is not finalized completely. But overall, capital projects are closing out as expected, and capital non-recurring projects, which would be the middle school lower ADA project that we are working on. The contractor has completed the drawings for that project, and we're looking to possibly go out to bid late fall, early winter, with hopes of awarding and having contracts starting next year over the summer. Repair of the athletic fields, Route 316 North. The turf is establishing with hopes to be on it in the spring. The comp field, the center of the field, turf is establishing. We're having issues with turf establishing along where they put the perimeter drain in, and we are looking at possible sod options. And speaking with the contractor and Tom Irwin and Byersers, looking to possibly do sod with an additional funds for that. As far as just general maintenance and custodial for the buildings, we have, again, 14 full-time custodians. The first time we're fully staffed. We were also able to secure 4 high school aged temporary help throughout the summer. They helped immensely with doing minor odds and ends for the custodians, assisting with changing mop bucket water and delivering packages and so on. We are still down 1 maintainer from the end of June. We are still actively looking to fill that position. We're conducting interviews as I speak. So hopefully we'll have somebody lined up and secured for the beginning of September. Also, losing sidetracked here. The required inspections. So again, there's a list of inspections that we have to do annually or semi-annually, which include the fire sprinkler system, dampers were due this year. That's done once every 5 years. The building fire system as a whole, the auditorium fire curtain, portable fire extinguishers, were either tags were changed or taken out of service and maintenance done on them and then reinstalled. The portable wall and all the gym equipment that is fixed to the ceilings was all inspected, making sure that the safety latches and then so on are working and operational. Gym floors were sanded and recoated. Kitchen exhaust hood was checked, cleaned, and inspected. Fume hoods in the science departments were checked. The air exchanges for those said classrooms were confirmed as we do annually, making sure that there's 8 air exchanges per hour. And then the facility grease trap, which is pumped out quarterly, was done as well back in July. And with that, if there's any questions or any detailed information anybody would like, I'd be happy to go further in.
Mike, this is Mike Sharon. I have one question for you about the building survey.
Sure.
You stated it's not yet complete. Is that only because the PM program has not been fully implemented with the schedules?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
What is the PM program?
Preventive maintenance.
Oh, preventive maintenance. Okay.
Let's talk about that at our next facilities session, please.
And can I ask, and among all the numerous tasks that were done, the VCTs were washed? What's a VCT?
It's abbreviation. I'm sorry. Vinyl competition tile. So it's your 12 by 12 floor tile was scrubbed and recoated with either 4 or 5 coats of wax, depending on the location.
Where are those? Is it the hallways or?
It's all your flooring in the hallways throughout the building and the classrooms.
Oh, okay. Right.
And the only other question that I had, I don't know if this is a question for Mike or for you, Colin. We had talked about getting Mike some help with the administrative portion of his job. Is that something that's been?
Yeah. So we've had the position posted, and we have we've identified a person through a temporary agency because we just couldn't find it through the regular posting process.
Yeah.
It's a position that is temporary, and then it gives us the ability to permanently hire the person if it works out. So he's getting the support that he needs.
All right, good news.
Yeah,
thank you.
It is. Yep.
Not a question, but it's a comment. There's a lot of stuff. I'm very impressed.
Yeah.
See just how much gets done.
That's what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It's a busy place during the summer.
Oh my gosh, there's people here. I walk around the building as part of. There's people here on Sundays at like 7 o'clock in the morning working.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions for Mike? Mike, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
That brings us to the draft subcommittee meeting calendar for the 2024-2025 year.
So yeah, in your board packet tonight, it's enclosure 10.5 is the proposed dates for the board subcommittee meetings. I did things a little differently this year. I grouped, so you could see the blue marking on the calendar is facilities and finance subcommittee. So I've grouped those. Historically, those haven't been grouped in the same nights, but it really kind of makes sense to do that because there's so many times where facilities and finance we're cross-pollinating and having meetings, particularly during the budget period. So to me, it makes sense to do those meetings in the same evening, and it just makes it a little bit easier to get together if we needed to do that. And so you could see that I followed the typical format, which is having those meetings take place every 5 to 6 weeks, which seems to be an appropriate time in between those meetings. Obviously, if there's something that comes up, we could schedule a special meeting. So that's how that schedule has played out. And you could also see that I grouped together the policy subcommittee, and then I did include the school choice subcommittee because I wasn't sure where we were going to land, and I wasn't expecting necessarily this evening's meeting to kind of be where we are with school choice. But I had scheduled those meetings monthly. As people on the policy subcommittee know, we need to meet with a higher level of frequency because I'm trying to come to every board meeting with policies to be considered as a first reading. So those are scheduled every month, and I grouped the school choice with that because I thought we'd need to meet more frequently in the beginning of the school year, and that I'd eventually see that committee dissolve most likely. And then the program subcommittee and members of that subcommittee know probably meets the most infrequently of all of them. We generally get together when there's new courses that come up or new programs that come up. But it's good to schedule those, and then just if we don't need to have those meetings to cancel them and just simply not have those conversations. So the only other thing that I wasn't sure if the board was interested in doing, but typically the first meeting of each evening starts at 6:30, and then the second meeting typically starts at 8. I wasn't sure if the board had a desire, and maybe it's a subcommittee decision meeting, but to try to maybe have the first meeting start at 5:30 and the second meeting starting at 7. Sometimes those meetings can go until 9:30, especially if you've got a weighty agenda. Obviously, it depends on people's availability, and I certainly understand that. And we can certainly stick with the 6:30 and 8 o'clock start time. But I just wanted to throw that out as a possibility if people were interested in trying to maybe wrap those meetings up a little earlier in the evening. So take any questions or comments about the proposed calendar.
I can do virtual meetings starting at 5:30. I can't make it here for that.
Yeah, I mean, they're all virtual meetings. These are all subcommittees are virtual.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I can do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can too.
So I was thinking, with the magnitude of the cell phone policy and what that all carries, I was wondering if we should have maybe a second policy subcommittee scheduled for before our September monthly meeting. If that could be arranged maybe the 11th or 12th.
We could
So I
certainly,
don't know what you think about that.
we could plug a date in there. We could either schedule it now or have the meeting on the 4th and then make a determination and schedule a special meeting for something like the 11th or the 12th.
I think that
We
makes
could do
sense.
that, yeah.
But I like the idea. It's good to be proactive with that for sure.
Yeah.
Pam, how do you feel about a 5:30 start for committee meetings? Is that workable?
Yeah, that's fine. I just had a quick question, and I'm sure this is someplace that I can find it, but the actual board meeting, the dates for all of those.
So right now, those meetings are scheduled through the end of, they're scheduled through January. We set the board meetings. We anticipate that they're going to follow the same pattern of being the third Monday when we could do it, and then we bump it to the fourth meeting if need be. But from a technical standpoint, I see that my secretary Jess was proactive and scheduled some board meetings in there in February and March, but really we don't schedule those technically until January. That's why this is a draft schedule that is being put forth. But we identify the board meeting dates, I believe, in the January meeting once the new board is, or December once the new board's been seated. Any new board members have been seated.
Although we don't have any elections for board members.
No, I don't think so. I don't
Years.
think it'll change over this year.
Okay, any,
All right, so I'll move forward with doing the 5:30 start times for the first one. And we'll get this buttoned up and finalized. So thank you.
still over to you, I believe. It's policy 9311.
Yeah, so in your board packet is a draft policy for 9311, which is formulation, adoption, amendment, or deletion of policies. It's a first read. People may know, particularly people on the policy subcommittee will know that this actually didn't come to the policy subcommittee. It was certainly not trying to avoid anything. It was just something that this is a change that I know has come up in some conversations about the idea of adding a component to this policy that enables the superintendent to make, for lack of a better term, changes in policy that relate to either recommendations from our school board attorney, which typically relate to changes in legislation, to really expedite the process of updating those policies. Because a lot of the policies that we've been working on over the past couple of years, coming for a first read and a second read, are really aligned with legislative changes. And it just, I know I've talked to Carrie about this. I know I've talked to Heather about this, about simply making an update to this policy, which would give the superintendent the ability to make some of those more housekeeping changes and simply inform the board about those changes that would be made. It would just really expedite the process and make it much more efficient. The language, so if you go to the second page of the policy that's in your packet, basically an additional bullet was added, bullet number 10, which I took this language specifically from Hebron Board of Education policies, because actually this was something that the superintendent of Hebron told me that they've gone to do in their district. And it seemed to make sense, and I wanted to put it forward. And I had spoken with Heather and Carrie both about, well, maybe it makes sense to bring it to a first read to the full board, because it's something that I think the entire board has to be philosophically on board with if we're going to do it. So the language is, as I said, essentially borrowed from the Hebron policy, and I can certainly take any questions if people have it.
Any discussion on that?
So I thought it was fine. I mean, I like the red edition. What struck me about this policy was the only place that the role of the policy committee on the board is addressed is in this new piece. There's absolutely no place on the first page that talks about the role of the policy committee as a committee of the board, including not even a role to suggest policies. So I thought maybe the policy committee should take this up and maybe see if we could recommend something that defines the role of the committee on our own policy. I mean, it just seems strange.
Are there other subcommittees, any of the standing subcommittees for which we have such a?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I think that, I mean, I've read through the internal board stuff, the whole policy level, 9,000 series. And I don't think there's anything that addresses that, because it's the role of the board as a whole to decide what subcommittees there are and what they're supposed to do. And I'm not sure that making that into policy, making those decisions into policy is.
Well, that's what my first thought was. It's just we have a policy on policies. So
Yeah.
That's, it sort of created that. And then the policy committee role came up in the new piece.
Yeah.
So we do have an existing policy 9150. It's under internal operations of the board and bylaws of the board that gets into subcommittees. And it highlights the fact, it says, in order to assist the Board of Education and internal management, the following subcommittees shall be designated. Board policy, program, communication technology, negotiations, facilities and safety, and finance. So it talks about, and then it gets into, the fact that the board chair appoints people to the individual subcommittees. And then basically a subcommittee chair is identified by members of the committee and gives some context for what the work of the subcommittees are going to be doing.
It does have that context. I didn't remember that.
Yeah, it just says the chairperson will ensure meeting minutes are completed, blah, blah, blah. Subcommittee members will be appointed annually. In the event that a regular subcommittee, it talks about the role of the subcommittee members, but it just simply says that, the role of the subcommittees is to aid in the internal management of the board.
Right. But it doesn't say specifically what the finance committee focuses on or what this, maybe a one sentence or at most, right?
It just says finance.
Okay.
It just says
It just says policy, just says finance. Yeah. So there's nothing like that there. I don't know that there should be, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah, it was my only concern, because if we're going to say that policy committee has to review things if there's an issue with something you put forward, it seems like we're putting a role in for the policy committee that doesn't exist already in the sort of broader policy context. It's a minor point, but it just struck me as odd.
All right, any other discussion on that, on 9311?
Yeah, I'm gonna need more time to think about this. I got back from vacation at 7:00 last night. And that's when I
What's the first read?
You're right. I understand. I just want to say that I'm not certain about this yet.
Okay.
I absolutely love the first paragraph, the housekeeping stuff. Absolutely, that shouldn't be the policy committees, but more substantive things.
All right, well, that will bring us to financials.
All right.
Just like being at the dentist, you
Oh,
take
I'm
a
off.
drink and I say,
I
it's
will
your
now
turn.
turn it over to I'm off. I'm done.
You're done.
I'm happy.
All right, so on enclosure 10.7A, you have the unaudited statement of net position for fiscal year end June 30th. There's a projected net favorable position of $1.5 million. We have to take into account less projected shortfall in revenue of $188,696. That leaves a revised projected net favorable position of $1.3 million. On this memo, I indicate the highest areas that had money available. As you can see, the unallocated personnel, which has the benefits and salaries that were budgeted for positions that either we could not fill or people resigned, all of that got moved into unallocated personnel. So that's the majority of our shortfall, or our not shortfall, having too much money. And then unfortunately, because we had student movement throughout the year for pupil services or special education, that left money on the table as well. So that gives you the areas where we had money left on the table. Moving forward for next school year, or for next budget year, I should say, we get to take 2% of the gross budget, which we will be able to keep $625,599 and put into a non-lapsing account, which it's my understanding that we are going to be able to keep it as a capital non-recurring account as opposed to creating a new general education account, but that's something on the table for future discussion. And based on the unaudited, these figures may change with audit. It appears that $758,118 would be given back to the towns as a credit offset from the 25-26 budget amount or budget year. The capital improvement fund has an unaudited favorable position of $112,816. The HVAC central office unit project has not had its final closeout yet, and the building survey for CIP planning is not finalized as of yet. In the capital non-recurring fund, there's a net favorable position of $818,192. That is comprised of $357,097 in the unallocated account, as well as field repairs are not completed. The concrete containment center is still not completed. The ADA project for the middle school baseball field is not completed. And as of the time of this memo, these shades were not installed, but now they are installed and completed. So are there any questions that anyone might have on the information that was presented here?
Yeah, I was wondering about the amount that's left of
So
4.5% of.
Right. So in your question that you emailed, so there's not anything typical, I guess, especially post-COVID and during COVID, nothing is typical anymore. This amount that is on the table is a little bit less than last year, so we're trending in the better position. But unfortunately, due to items such as bus driver shortages and not being able to fill all the routes all the time, that in other shortage areas that we keep having, that seems to be hard for us to pinpoint
where we should end up. But again, we're trying to do our best to use up the money and use it the way that we budgeted for.
Right, and of course, I mean, you would hope that at the end there's always a little bit left over because you know you don't want to be the other side of that.
No. Right.
That's a real problem.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's
And
a
the
big
fact
problem.
that we can just give it back to the towns,
Right.
you know, get a big chunk of it back to the towns. The towns actually, you know, at least Andover is not upset about this. Andover was perfectly happy to say that sounds like a reasonable budget, and you didn't spend it all. Great, we'll take it. You know, but 4.5% sounded like a large amount for a $31 million budget. But, 4.5% of a $5 million budget might be reasonable. You know,
right.
31 sounds high, but I just don't know. I don't have any basis for that comparison.
So I feel like last year we were higher. We were in the $1.6 million range. So we're trending in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, and just looking at it, I mean, the largest chunk is unallocated personnel. And so, you know, there's so many moving parts with regards to personnel issues because it's not just salaries, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's also benefits as well. So salaries and benefits are the most expensive, it's the largest part of any budget period of any organization. And so when we have teachers that are resigning mid-year, when we have teachers that are taking unpaid leave of absence for a period of time, and we're backfilling somebody that their salary is, let's just say $75,000, and we're paying a substitute $115 a day to do that job because we can't find somebody, because literally we can't find somebody to hire as a certified teacher. And even if we did hire them as a certified teacher or certified long-term substitute, we don't pay them that $75,000. Those types of personnel things add up. And then we had unfilled vacancies, as Eva said. We had, I think for most of the year, we had three or four custodian positions. I think for most of the year, we had 3 or 4 paraprofessional positions that weren't filled. And we talked about that during the budget process, that I don't want to remove those positions, because if I do, then we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage, and it has a negative impact on students. So I think that the lion's share of that money coming from unallocated personnel, I agree. There's not like a standard for us to base it off of, but I could tell you that personnel issues are running rampant across not only school districts, but organizations across the state and across the country post-COVID. And that's the thing that we're trying to contend with is, the staffing shortage is real, and we're seeing how that's financially impacting us as well. In some cases, it benefits us. In some cases, it doesn't. When we can't find a speech path, or when we can't find an occupational therapist last year, we had to contract for an occupational therapist, and it cost us $40,000 more than what we expected it to if we had just hired somebody, but we couldn't find anybody to hire. So it's a constant ebb and flow with regards to the personnel matters, and that's really the lion's share of the money.
Yeah, I'm not worried about this. I'm just wondering.
Yeah,
because I haven't seen it before.
I'd love it to be more steady.
Yeah,
because that means
every year.
That means staffing is more steady, to be honest.
Yeah.
With you.
I have one question.
Yep.
On page 1, we talk about the projected shortfall in revenue of 188.
Yep.
Can we talk a little bit about what that consists of?
So there was our excess cost because we had the student move. So that we got a shortfall there. And then there were some other areas.
So that was a student moving into the district?
Out.
Okay.
They took their diploma early.
Okay.
So our student parking fees didn't come up where they needed to come up. Miscellaneous income. So that's usually KERMA, because we're members of KERMA. They usually give us
some stipend there.
Part of their whatever. If they made money, we get some of it.
Okay.
I forget what it's called. Sorry, off the top of my head. And gate receipts were a little bit lower. Our rentals, we did phenomenally. Medicaid went up. Interest went up based on what we were projecting. So yeah, we just picked.
Thank you. That's all I was looking for.
Yeah, no worries.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions on that one?
Just a note about the weird formatting of the table.
Yeah, my apologies for that. I guess I should have tried to print it first just to see. My apologies.
Just weird, not a problem. Be readable.
Because it's not legible too well, but it is what it is, unfortunately. All right, so 10.7B is the budget appropriation transfers for year end. So this is these are the remaining transfers that need to be voted upon so that we can close out our books.
I'll make a motion to approve the year-end budget appropriation transfers for fiscal year 23-24 in total amount of $508,672.84 as presented. Got to you.
Second.
So Scott Slayett was first, and then Gabe Marks was second. Any other discussion on that?
You're welcome to present. I just wanted to get the motion. We're actually supposed to do that by Robert's rules.
No worries.
Robert's rules are supposed to do the motion before we discuss things.
I appreciate that. So basically the most expensive, the highest dollar one was entry 288, and that's where I was moving all the available funds into the unallocated. So that's, I don't know if anyone has any questions, but that's basically, it's just cleaning up for year end.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anybody abstain? Okay.
Okay, so moving on, we have enclosure 10.7C. This is again unaudited for the year end June and month end June 2024. So basically there is a loss for the year of $39,573.98. However, the positive news here is that there is still an ending fund balance. So we still have a fund balance in food service. So we don't have any worries in that regard there. I'm not sure. Oh, the most important part is the state of Connecticut passed during their legislative process a new program that, well, it's the same program, but it has a new name called the State Transition Assistant for Reduced Price, or better known as STAR. So any reduced child or any child that qualifies for reduced meals will get their meals for free again this year. So a breakfast meal and a lunch meal will be for free, and the state will reimburse us at a higher rate for those meals. Are there any questions for food service?
Well, if Walsh becomes our new vice president, I think we might get this for all students.
Oh, it'd be easier.
Yes.
All right, so hearing no additional questions, enclosure 10.7D is the short-term investment fund. And the dividend reinvested for the month of June was $1,612.58. And you had made a comment that you had emailed it again. That would need to go to facilities subcommittee or a poll of the board to see if anything needs to be taken away or if other people would prefer to have.
Right. So my suggestion in that email was simply that this last page that has the daily interest rates that we received is more than I think we ever would need. Does anybody remember what June 8th was, the interest rate on June 8th was? What the factory rates? I just see no reason to include this in our monthly reports. It seems a waste of paper, just a waste of energy. And we the other stuff up top, that's got all the the actual changes and the overall rates. Sure, that's great. That's nice to have. But the daily thing just seems a little redundant. So I don't know if other members. I don't think we need an actual formal vote on this.
No.
If we can just, if people want to keep it, then I don't really object. I just can't see why anybody would want to.
We could move the effective yield and the simple interest onto some other page and save a sheet of paper. I'm all for it. Put it on the agenda and vote on it next time or something, I guess.
I think if we just get a direction from the board, we don't need to.
Oh, we don't have to do a promotion
I
and
don't
all
think
that.
so.
All right.
You're just asking us to.
I'd say get rid of it.
But again, I defer to. Is there consensus?
Yeah,
All good. All good.
Okay.
I do have a question about consideration for contributing more money into the account.
Yeah, so maybe after we do this audit, because Michael has been asking me to do that too. I just want to make sure that everything ties out, and then yes,
Okay.
we'll do that.
Well, what is that? I'm sorry, what is the question? What is
Because
the-
there's money sitting in a regular bank account, so try to move some more money into
This
the
one.
STIF account.
Yeah, okay.
And that would come from a consensus.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not,
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, that's a vote.
That's fine.
All right, and so for my final one is the student activity, which is enclosure 10.7E. So at this time, everything balances to the bank account at Webster Bank. Are there any questions that anyone might have over student activity? So hearing none, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to 10.8, which is discussion of possible action related to the 2024-2027 nurses and LPNs contract.
Great. So just recap quickly. We've concluded negotiations and reached a tentative agreement with the nurses group. As the board knows, this is a very small group. Its membership is there's 3 individuals. And I'll just give a quick high-level overview of the financial implications of the new contract. It would be a 3-year contract starting July 1st, 2024, going to June 30th, 2027. In year 1 of the contract, we're looking at a 4% increase for GWI. In year 2 of the contract, a 3.5% increase for GWI. And in year 3 of the contract, a 3% increase in GWI. I just want to make sure that everybody remembers this is not a group that has step costs. There's no step costs associated with it. Typically, not typically, but in some of our bargain units, we have step costs associated, which adds to the financial implications of a GWI increase. But in this case, it does not. And then finally, the employee premium cost share for all 3 years of the contract is being increased from a 21.5% increase to a 22% increase, and remaining there at all 3 years. And it's my recommendation. There's a recommended motion in your board notes to approve the contract as presented.
So I'll make a motion to approve the 2024-2027 contract between the Region 8 Board of Education, the Region 8 School Nurses, and LPNs as described by Superintendent.
That's Drew Golphin. We have a second.
I'll second Mike Sharon.
Mike Sharon. Any discussion on? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay, that's going to bring us to the committee reports. Facilities, safety, and transportation.
Looking forward to our first session coming after the summer break. So I think one of the things we want to talk about is the facility survey and understand what that looks like relative to preventive maintenance activities that we need to plan and some of the higher dollar costs that we're looking toward in the coming years, whether it be boilers or roof replacements. So those are on the agenda. And the other thing that is probably going to move up in priority is replacement of the track. So all things we need to get on our agenda.
Okay. Finance, audit, compliance, and insurance.
So we don't have anything yet to put on our agenda, except this is my first year going into this. So when do we start the budget?
Well, we start the budget in like 3 weeks, I think. Pretty close.
Some of us have started.
Not really. I try not to think about it. I'm on summer mode.
You had so much fun, Drew. You just want to get going. Right?
Oh yeah. But I don't think there's anything on our radar.
There is. We haven't talked about it yet, but there were some legislative changes that took place in this most recent legislative session that I think is going to have to be something that we discuss in totality as a board. It's how regionalized school districts can use the 2% from the remaining from the previous years. We've been restricted for as long as I think it's been allowable to only use those funds for capital non-recurring projects, which I think has been a real benefit to the district because it's enabled us to really address some of these field issues and as Mike just said, the track during the process of doing the work to the comp field, what we kept hearing again and again is, you guys need new track. You guys need new track. But that did change, and boards of ed were given an opportunity, or have been given an opportunity, to use the 2% funds for operational costs.
I thought I heard you say something about that before.
Yep. So I think that's going to be a conversation that I think we have to have as far as, but here's what I think is important is, as a board, we can make a decision, or you can make a decision, that we're going to continue to utilize the funding for the purpose of addressing those capital projects that we otherwise are going to be able to get to. And so I think an appropriate place for us to start that conversation is with the finance subcommittee. Yeah. And certainly we can invite members of the facility subcommittee meeting to attend. Actually, well, maybe it's one of those dual meetings.
I think it's one of those dual meetings.
One of those dual meetings we can talk about it, because I agree, a lot of the things that we're going to have to talk about are going to be also from the list and stuff are going to be big. So that's really going to be a topic of conversation for that combined meeting we have coming up.
Okay, negotiations.
We are continuing to negotiate with the non-certified staff.
The paras.
The paras. And in the fall, we look forward to negotiating with the teachers.
Yep, absolutely.
Policy.
We haven't met since the last meeting.
Yeah, next meeting's September 4th.
And you've got plenty on the list.
Yeah.
There's always plenty on the list.
There's always plenty on the list, exactly.
Okay. Program and communication.
We meet someone frequently. We don't have a chair of that particular subcommittee. So we look forward to our first meeting, I would say, part of the new school year.
Yep.
All right. And then school choice.
I think we already talked about everything today.
And then facilitators, we have CABE, which is Carrie. So I think we're.
Yeah, I'll just mention, I had mentioned the CABES CAPS convention earlier on. I was wrong as far as the date. It is not the Friday and Saturday before Thanksgiving this year. It is the Friday and Saturday before that. So it is the 15th and the 16th. You'll be getting an email from, all board members will be getting an email from Jessica Rainville in the coming days asking if you're interested in attending, so that we could do the early bird registration to get the most discounted rate for that. But again, the 15th and the 16th, and it's a all day Friday. Then they have Friday events in the evening, and then they have workshops again. And it's held, generally speaking, at the, what is it? Marriott.
It's the Marriott, like in Mystic.
In Mystic, correct? Yeah.
Right off the highway.
Yep. So.
All right, that brings us to public comments. Hebron, Andover, and Marlborough community engagement and attendance at BOE public meetings is welcomed. The public comment segment of the meeting agenda is set aside so the BOE may receive public comments. Procedurally, public remarks will be limited to 3 minutes, and citizens will be asked to identify themselves. Because the BOE is limited by the Freedom of Information Act to discussing only matters on the agenda, the BOE is not permitted to engage in a discussion of the comments presented. Is there anybody that would like to make public comment? Hi. Welcome back to school.
Welcome back. Oh, somebody took my seat. Ethan Snelling, 22 Rivendell Road, President, RHAM Education Association. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. It was a TV show. If you remember that one.
Cotter.
Teachers are looking forward to coming back to school. I do want to talk about cell phones. I appreciate the work that our administration has done, being open and discussing cell phone policy and moving in the right direction. I appreciate it. Since it was a topic last year, I do have some data from the faculty that I did collect, and I'll share with you in a minute. But I am concerned if that we're going to wait for the governor to decide what happens in Hebron, which he probably couldn't even identify on a map, we're going to be sorely disappointed. The governor does not care what goes on in Hebron, Connecticut. It is up to the board to make decisions for the children of this community. I'm sure it's not going to be riveting, his decision. He's not going to say you can do this, you can't do that. It's just going to be some generalizations for schools to follow. And to miss this opportunity would be foolish. Cell phones aren't bad. An actual cell phone is not the problem. It's the behaviors that come with the use of cell phones. And it's the behaviors that frustrate administration, and teachers, right? And to do nothing about it now and say, let's wait, is disheartening. Has anybody ever heard of the sunken cost fallacy? It's something where organizations fall into a trap of it's too late, we can't, we have a plan and we're just gonna plow ahead. Think of the Taiwanese children in the cave that got trapped a few years back. Why didn't you turn around? We were in too far. Think of the New York Giants. We're gonna run the football. It's the fourth quarter, you're down by 40, throw the freaking ball, right? It happens all the time in organizations and groups. And so when I hear like, let's wait, it's disheartening. In the classroom, teachers make changes on the fly and students respond all the time. If I have a crappy lesson or something's not going right in my classroom policy or procedure, I don't say, let's wait till next year to hash it out. Teachers change it immediately. And there's nothing wrong with the board saying, let's put something in place and start some communication so that when students come back in September, they understand the policy and it's how clear it is. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's not fall into the sunken fallacy trap and say, well, let's just wait and talk about it more. We're not looking at rewriting the policy or rewriting a Declaration of Independence. We're just looking at established standards that everybody can follow in the classroom regarding cell phones. Do they go off in class? Yes. Do I have students put them in a holder? Yes. Is it transparent? No, because students will turn their cameras facing the classroom if it's transparent and record what's going on in the classroom. Do they take pictures of teachers? All the time without permission. Do they look at their watches? Yes, but it doesn't seem to be as distracting. They do a quick look and then they're back in. But it's not just the student behavior that's frustrating, it's the loss of productivity for a teacher. In the current policy, who walks the cell phone down to the office? The teacher. The second referral, you have to write a referral, you have to walk into the office. Who's doing that? The teacher. The third time, it's a conversation with administration about what happened and another referral. It takes an entire prep period to write a referral. It's productivity. And that could be for one student in the same week. I could lose 3 prep periods out of 5 where I should be planning for other students, other lessons, doing other things for the school instead of taking care of these behaviors. It would just be helpful if we had a consistent policy for everybody to follow. I appreciate that RHAM administration gives teachers autonomy to make decisions in their classroom. But I also feel for administration because they have to understand 136 teacher cell phone policies in the school. I feel bad for the students who have to understand 8 teacher cell phone policies. And it creates confusion and it's not fair to them as well. So I think we could do something now. If you want to know how the teachers feel, we asked one question. Are you in favor of a cell phone free school day at RHAM last June? Out of 136 teachers, 106 teachers answered. 93 said yes, and 13 said no. That's where the teachers stand. I was hoping to share this data with administration today, but I stopped by and we were busy, so I apologize. I thought it was something that might be useful during your presentation. It's not meant to spring data on anybody here. But this is where the teachers are. That's where they were in June. Everyone's excited to come back to school. Everybody can't wait to get back in the classroom. But if something's not working for me on day one, I'm going to change it right there and then, because that's what you do when something's not working. And this cell phone policy, while we changed it, works well, but it has not been consistently and clearly expressed to the students, parents, over and over and over again. Every day when students walk in my room, it's on the board. Cell phones go in the holder, please put it away. Most kids do, but every day I have to remind them, every day. And I think I mentioned this in June. Every day, on day 179, I have to tell kids, can you please put your cell phone away? And it gets exhausting. And so while I'm excited to get back to school, and I know every teacher is at RHAM, we know what's coming. We know what's coming. The fights with the cell phone. It's not every student, but it can take up your time during the day to have to stop, write referrals over and over again. It's also disheartening to hear that, well, I was told I can keep it in my backpack instead of putting it away. You know what that does for classroom management? When 18, 14-year-olds agree to put it away, and then 2 of them say, well, I was told I can just leave it in my backpack. that's just the classroom management killer. That's just that's not even good leadership in the classroom if you let that happen. So please reconsider, board. Please reconsider having something in place that we can communicate to the parents. Let's be honest, nobody looks at their email until the week before school anyways. If we send out an email now, who's looking at it? But it's never too late to do the right thing. And I think that's what administration would expect for teachers to do in the classroom. And I think that's not too much to ask the board to do regarding cell phones. And at the end of the year, I'm hoping we can come back and look at it again. Has this worked? Has it not worked? What can we do to make it better? Maybe we can get parent input, we can get student input. But let's not sell students and parents short and say, well, this is going to be too big of an ask. Let's not sell them short. Because a lot of kids are looking for help and a lot of parents are looking for help regarding their child's cell phone use. And I think we could do that. We could pull together and we can get it done now. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to make public comment? Yes.
Hi, I'm Teresa Kelly. I live in 78 Giravati Road in Andover. I'm also a teacher at RHAM, and I just wanted to say, whatever the policy is, cell phone policy, whenever it's implemented, I would like the board to consider a full day, no cell phones, those pouches, kind of something like they talked about at Manchester. As a parent, sure, it's convenient. I have my own kids text me sometimes during the day, even when I know they're in class. And, you know, they're updating me on something was canceled or whatever, but they could also email me. The kids have their Chromebooks all day long. I have email all day long, and we could provide kids access to, you know, the office phones or something. So to me, as a parent, that would not be an insurmountable, you know, problem for taking the cell phones all day. And I would love the idea of seeing the kids in the cafeteria engaging with each other, because I've seen exactly that, even with my own children, walk in and they're all on their phones sitting at the table together. And I think that's a part of raising them as as kids in this age, teaching them, you know, to interact when they're in an awkward situation, when they're, you know, in a social situation. They default to their phones, you know, to avoid an uncomfortable situation or not sure what to do. And I think it'd be good to provide them opportunities in the school day not to, and would, I feel like, drastically decrease some discipline problems related to cell phone use, both in the classroom and in the passing times and cafeteria, et cetera.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone online? Eric? Okay, thank you. Calendar of events?
I mean, there's a whole host of things that start very, very shortly. I would just say, I'll mention again, the big things are obviously convocation on the 26th, the start of school on the 29th. We've had our practices started for our athletic teams for the fall seasons. We're going to be having parent nights, freshman orientations. There's just a lot of stuff that's going to be going on, keeping us busy over the course of the next month.
Do you happen to know if they deconflicted the open house with the town community boards meeting?
19th of September.
Pardon?
19th of September.
Is that what it is?
That's, yeah, they were both on the same night. So it went back to Tierney to, I just wasn't sure if they had
I don't,
deconflicted.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's been a date on our calendar for a long period of time, so I don't know if the town has changed their plans.
Okay.
And
then the
discipline report is, so we provided information about discipline during the month of June and just the total numbers for both the high school and the middle school for in-school and out-of-school suspensions.
Okay.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
And Gabe marks for first and second. Thank you, everybody, for coming out.
You haven't voted on it.
You gotta vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor of adjourning? Aye. Opposed? Anyone abstain?
Good luck with your start school.
Yeah, good luck. It's always exciting at the beginning of the year.
Are we off, Eric?
Eric,